My name is Kendra. I live alone, far from any town or city where the world seems to fade into the distance. I've always found peace in the quiet, the stillness. But one evening, all that changed. I wasn't expecting company. Definitely not the kind of company that showed up on that stormy night. I was about to lock up for the night when I heard a knock. Hesitant, ragged, barely audible over the howling wind. I opened the door, and there he was. A man, bloodied, desperate, dragging himself through the snow. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. Something told me he needed help, and I've always been the kind of person to give it. I dragged him inside, warmed him up, did what I could. He barely spoke. His eyes, though, there was something in them, something off. But I brushed it aside. But as the days ran into months, and there was more, the way he moved, the way he never slept, always watching the windows, the way he seemed to heal far too quickly. Still, I told myself he was just a man, an outlaw, running from something. It was a story I'd heard before. But then, one night, the storm picked up again. The wind howled like something alive, and he wasn't there. I found him outside, staring at the woods, his body stiff, his eyes glowing faintly in the moonlight. That's when I realized something was wrong. Something was very wrong, but I had no idea just how wrong it would get. This is where my story begins. Let's just say, I had no idea what I was letting myself into. The wind was the first thing I heard. A long, drawn-out wail as it cut through the trees, shaking the cabin. It always did this when the storm hit, and the windows rattled in their frames. The walls groaned with the weight of the world outside. But I was used to it. I had to be. Out here, there was nothing but the howling wilderness and the creeping cold that never seemed to let go. I was just finishing up for the night, stoking the fire, securing the door, drawing the curtains when it happened. The knock. It wasn't like any knock I'd ever heard. It wasn't the polite tap of a visitor or even the frantic knock of someone seeking refuge. No, this was a desperate, barely there sound, more like a faint thud against the wood. My fingers froze on the curtain. For a moment, I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it, the wind playing tricks in the dark. But there it came again. A weak, almost frantic knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. It was too late. The storm too fierce for anyone to be out there. But still, I opened the door. I could barely make him out at first. His body was slumped against the frame, swaying with the wind as if he didn't have the strength to hold himself up. Blood stained the snow at his feet, a dark, sickly red against the pure white. His clothes were torn, soaked in what I could only assume was his own blood. His face, pale, almost lifeless, yet there was a flicker of awareness in his eyes when they met mine. Without a second thought, I grabbed him by the arm and pulled him inside. "You're safe now," I said, more to reassure myself than him. But as soon as the door closed behind us, I felt the weight of his presence. It wasn't just the blood or the way he barely seemed to be breathing. It was something more, something primal. It was in the air, thick and heavy. Me like the storm itself had followed him inside. I guided him to the fire, my hands shaking as I knelt to help him remove his torn jacket. His skin was ice cold, and I cursed under my breath. What had happened to him? "Stay with me," I whispered, forcing the words past a dry throat. "I'm going to get you patched up." He didn't answer, just that faint glimmer in his eyes, but something about it sent a shiver up my spine. As I worked on tending to his wounds, I tried to piece together the little information I had. His face was unfamiliar. No one came this far out unless they were lost, desperate, or running. And from the look of him, he was most definitely running. But from what? And who? I cleaned the gash on his side, doing my best to stop the bleeding, but it was slow, far too slow. The blood didn't stop, it just kept coming. Too much for someone who looked like they'd been traveling for hours. What had he been through? I noticed something strange as I applied pressure to the wound. His skin was too hot. Hotter than it should have been for someone who'd been in the cold for so long. Was he feverish? Delirious? I didn't have time to think about it. I needed to act quickly, keep him stable until I could figure out what to do next. I tried to wake him, shaking his shoulders gently. "Hey, can you hear me? What happened to you?" He moaned, just a low, guttural sound, his head rolling to the side. Then, through the fog of his fever, he mumbled something I couldn't quite make out. His voice was strained, a growl lurking beneath the words. A strange tremor passed through him, like a ripple running through his body, and for a moment, I thought he might be shaking from cold or shock. But then it stopped. And that's when I noticed it. His pupils. They weren't normal. The color, amber. Deep, glowing amber. I recoiled, my heart hammering in my chest. What the hell was going on? I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in over my head. He wasn't just an outlaw. There was something far more dangerous about him. Something that wasn't human. As the hours passed, I tried to ignore the growing unease in my gut. There was a part of me that wanted to run, to lock him out and never look back. But then again, there was something else. Something I couldn't name. Maybe it was his eyes, his voice, the way he seemed to pull me in, even when my mind screamed to turn away. I was starting to feel the pull, just like the storm outside, in drawing me into a whirlpool I didn't understand. By the time the fire burned low and I was sitting on the floor beside him, I felt the first stirrings of doubt. My hand rested on his chest, my fingers pressing against the heat of his skin. And that's when I noticed something else. Something so faint I thought I was imagining it at first. His heart. It was too strong, too rhythmic, like a drumbeat. Steady, forceful, not human. Was I overreacting? Was I just tired? Or was there more to him than I'd first thought? I leaned in closer. His breath was slow, shallow, but steady. He still hadn't said a word, but the tension in his body spoke louder than anything. Something told me he wasn't just unconscious. Something told me he was waiting. Waiting for what? I shook the thought away. I needed to think. I had to keep him alive, get him back on his feet. I didn't have the luxury of panic, but as the wind screamed outside, I couldn't ignore it. I was panicking. Deep down, I knew something wasn't right, but I couldn't put my finger on it. Then, the silence broke. It was soft at first, just a slight movement, a whisper of a sound like shifting skin. And I froze. My eyes locked on him. The man I was trying to save, the man I had brought into my home. But I didn't know who he really was. And that thought, it chilled me more than the wind outside. What was he hiding? The fire crackled in the silence and I waited. I waited for something. For him to wake up. For the storm to pass. For the answers I knew would change everything. But nothing came. Not yet. The storm had passed, but the silence it left behind was even more unnerving. Popping and cracking in the hearth. My popping and cracking in the hearth. My eyes, however, were fixed on him. The stranger? The outlaw? He was no longer unconscious, but even in his sleep, There was something off about him. I didn't know what it was. I couldn't place it. But his presence. It seemed to fill every corner of the room, like he wasn't quite human. I noticed the change the second morning. When I'd first brought him in, he barely seemed able to move, his body wrecked and trembling from the cold, the blood loss, and whatever else he'd been running from. But when I checked on him, he was sitting up, his back straight as a rod, his head cocked just slightly to one side like he was listening for something. He looked at me then, his eyes, those amber eyes, locked onto mine. He was awake, but not quite present. Something about the way he studied me sent a shiver up my spine. "Good morning," I said, trying to break the tension that hung between us. I gave him a weak smile, but he didn't smile back. He just stared at me, his gaze calculating, assessing, like he was trying to figure me out. And that was when I noticed it. The way he moved. It wasn't natural. His movements were too fluid, too deliberate, like he wasn't bound by the same limits as ordinary people. The way he turned his head, the way he flexed his fingers, curling and uncurling them with an almost predatory grace. Was it me? Or was there something different about him? He finally spoke, his voice rough, barely more than a whisper. "You shouldn't have done this." The words hit me like a slap in the face. His tone wasn't angry, but it was full of something darker. Regret? Worry? Something I couldn't understand. "Why?" I asked, my breath catching in my throat. "Because now they'll know. They'll come for you." His voice dropped lower, his eyes flicking toward the window as if he could sense something beyond the walls of the cabin. "You should have left me to die." I didn't know what he meant. My chest tightened as I processed his words, but before I could ask anything more, he shifted again. This time, the change was subtle, too subtle, but it was there. His breath hitched, his body stiffening for a moment, and I saw a flicker in his eyes, a flicker of something wild, something untamed. The air around us felt different, heavy, intense. I couldn't explain it, but a chill crept down my spine, and I felt it deep in my gut. A presence. It was almost as if something was watching us. I ignored it. Or at least, I tried to. He was recovering. That's all that mattered. But as the days passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't telling me something, that he was hiding something. And whatever it was, it made him dangerous. Yet, despite my growing unease, I couldn't bring myself to push him away. I should have. I should have locked the door, told him to leave once he'd recovered. But there was something about him, something about the way he looked at me. His presence called to something inside me, something I couldn't ignore, no matter how much my rational mind screamed to be cautious. I began noticing more strange things as I continued to care for him over time. And catch him staring at me. Not like and catch him staring at me, not like a man watches a woman, but like a wolf watches prey. It wasn't that I was afraid of him, not yet, but I couldn't deny that I felt trapped in his gaze, like he was drawing me in, pulling me closer, keeping me on edge. I continued helping him with his recovery, but every moment I spent near him, I grew more aware of the distance between us. It wasn't just physical. There was something in his eyes that kept me at arm's length, even though he needed me. His strength began to return faster than I expected. In fact, it was unnatural. His wounds, which I thought would take weeks to heal, were closing at an alarming rate. His bruises faded overnight, and the gash on his side, the one that had bled so much, was barely a scar now. It was too fast, too perfect. The unease grew, but then came the moment I couldn't ignore. The moment everything changed. I had gone out to gather some firewood. The storm had passed, but the cold still clung to the earth. The air was crisp, sharp with the scent of pine and snow. As I returned to the cabin, I saw him, standing in front of the window, his back to me, his shoulders tense. He didn't move when I stepped inside. His stillness was unnatural. I called out to him, but he didn't respond. I stepped closer, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, with no warning, he spun around. The change was instant. His eyes flared up, glowing. I took a step back, feeling the air between us shift. He looked at me like he was seeing me for the first time. He inhaled deeply, and I saw his nostrils flare, the way his muscles tensed, the way his jaw clenched. He was fighting something. I froze, the words dying on my lips. What was he doing? Shifting. I realized then, with a sinking feeling, that he wasn't just a man. I didn't know what he was, but I knew, without a shadow of a doubt, that the world he came from wasn't the same one I knew. "You shouldn't be here," he growled, the words barely human, but there was a raw power in his voice. His eyes flicked toward the door, his body rippling with tension. "They're coming." I barely had time to react. Before I could ask what he meant, the sound of howling echoed from the distance, a long, mournful cry that sent a chill through me, deeper than the cold air outside. What had I gotten myself into? I was only beginning to realize that the man I had taken in wasn't just running from his past was coming for me. The silence that followed the storm was almost suffocating. The winds had died down, leaving only the crackling of the fire to break the quiet. But it was too still, too empty. I felt the weight of every breath I took, the air heavy with something I couldn't explain. The night stretched on, far longer than I expected, and I found myself glancing at the door to the room where he was. Every time I passed by, something tugged at my chest, something that wasn't just fear, something deeper, almost alive. He had barely spoken since I brought him in. A few muttered words here and there, nothing of real substance. And then, after I'd helped him with his wounds, he had locked himself away. At first, I thought he was just exhausted. But now, the silence in the cabin was starting to feel like a wall I couldn't break. My thoughts kept returning to the way his eyes had glinted in the firelight, the way he watched me when he thought I wasn't looking, as though he was weighing every movement, every word I said. The air in the cabin felt thicker now, colder even with the fire burning hot. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I felt it in my bones, something in the space between us, something wrong. Maybe it was just the isolation playing tricks on me. But then, something shifted inside me, a flicker of something. I wasn't imagining it. I'd started noticing the changes in him. It wasn't just his injuries healing at a rate that was far too fast for any human body. It was in the way his posture changed when I wasn't looking, the way he seemed to hold himself differently, like he wasn't just recovering, but becoming something else. I tried to brush it off. It didn't make sense, but I couldn't help myself. I had to know more. I had to confront him. So, I did what I thought was the logical thing. I knocked on the door. The tension in my body was intense as I held my breath, waiting for him to answer. When nothing came, I knocked again, a little louder this time. Still no answer. Something inside me stirred. I felt a pull, like a whisper at the back of my mind telling me to open the door. So I did. He was sitting there, facing the wall, his head tilted ever so slightly, his eyes shut. The room was colder than it had any right to be, and the chill crawling under my skin as soon as I stepped inside. The air thickened around him, and I swear I could feel it. Something dark, something alive in the space between us. Then he spoke.
You shouldn't have brought me here, Kendra. You think you're helping, but you're not. You have no idea what you're getting into. You never should have saved me. This isn't just a wound, it's a curse. I'm not just running from the law, from people who want to hurt me. I'm running from what I am. Do you understand? I'm not human, not like you. The pack. They're still out there hunting me. And now they'll come for you too. I've seen their eyes, their hunger. I can feel them closing in.
His voice was low, tight, with barely contained tension. The words sent a shiver straight through my spine. Felt heavier than it ever had been before. The air felt heavier than it ever had been before. His amber eyes flickered open then, locking onto mine, and I saw something in them. Something that had always been there, but I'd been too blind to see. You can't stop them. They'll find you, Kendra, and they'll kill you. And me. You shouldn't have gotten involved. This is where your story ends. The weight of his words crashed down on me. I should have been scared, terrified even, but instead I felt the pull toward him deepen. It was an undeniable force, something magnetic, something I couldn't explain. Was it fear? Or was it something else? Something dangerous? I stood frozen for a moment, unable to process what I'd just heard. He wasn't just an outlaw. He wasn't just a man in need of help. He was a shifter. A wolf? A predator who had been running from something far worse than the law. As I stared at him, I felt the fear begin to creep in. It didn't make sense. Nothing about this made sense. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he was telling the truth. And that terrified me even more than the thought of the pack hunting me down. But there was more. Something deeper than just fear. Something I couldn't ignore. Something inside me told me I couldn't walk away from him. I needed to know more. I needed answers. I opened my mouth to speak, but before I could form the words, his body tensed, his eyes darting to the window. The stillness in the room grew. Every second stretched, pulling tighter, as if the world itself was holding its breath. The man on the floor, the outlaw, the alpha, looked at me with a mixture of regret and sorrow. The pack was here, and now I was part of their hunt. The storm had passed, but the unsettling silence left in its wake was more oppressive than the howl of the wind had ever been. Outside, the world had returned to its quiet state. Snow covered the ground like a thick, impenetrable blanket. The usual peace of the wilderness, the comforting rhythm of nature I had grown used to, was now shrouded in something else, something far less calm. I stood at the window, watching the snow fall, feeling a coldness that had nothing to do with the temperature outside. The wind had died down, but the world beyond the cabin felt off. The trees, usually still, seemed to shudder in the breeze. The snow, freshly settled, held an eerie stillness. And there was no chirping of birds, no rustling of small creatures in the woods. It was as though the forest itself had gone quiet, waiting for something. I didn't want to admit it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I tried to tell myself it was the isolation, the endless days of solitude starting to play tricks on me. The storm had left me unnerved, and the isolation of the cabin was beginning to feel suffocating. But as I turned from the window, I couldn't escape the sensation. I had grown used to the way the world outside had always felt open, unguarded. But now, something about it seemed to be closing in on me. The howl of wolves in the distance echoed across the land. It was distant, almost faint. But there was something different about it. Not just the usual calls that I heard from time to time, and these were sharper, more urgent. A growl laced with hunger, a sound that vibrated deep in my chest, as though it were calling from somewhere far deeper than the forest. It wasn't the casual sound of wolves moving through their territory. It was the call of something on the hunt. A shiver ran down my spine, and I took a step back from the window, my gaze snapping toward the door to his room. The man, the outlaw. Since that night, since he had opened up to me about his past, about what he was running from, the uncertainty had only deepened. His words echoed in my mind. You don't know what you're getting into. I'm not just running from the law. I'm running from something far worse. From who I really am. I tried to ignore the truth behind those words, tried to push it to the back of my mind, but it clawed its way back, every day, every moment. The more I tried to pretend I hadn't heard it, the more I felt the weight of it settle on my chest. He was different. From the very first moment I'd brought him into my cabin, I'd known something wasn't right. But it wasn't just his wounds or the way he bled too much and healed too fast. It wasn't just the strange tension in his movements or the way he locked himself away at night. It was something deeper, something darker. The wolves' howls became louder, sharper, closer. Something was wrong. I shook my head, trying to focus on what needed to be done. The fire in the hearth crackled, casting long shadows across the room, but I couldn't focus on the comforting warmth of it. Every time I turned my gaze toward the door to his room, I felt that pull, that strange, irresistible force. I couldn't keep avoiding him. It was driving me mad, wondering what he was doing behind that door. With my heart pounding, I moved toward the door and placed my hand on the knob. The weight of my own breath echoed in my ears, and I hesitated. Was this the right thing to do? Did I really want to know what he was hiding? Did I want to see what had changed in him? But the door was already slightly ajar when I stepped forward. I hesitated for a moment, my breath hitching as I peeked inside. He was standing by the window, staring out into the night. His back was to me, but I could see the tension in his body. His shoulders were rigid, his muscles coiled, as if waiting for something. Waiting for someone. His head was tilted slightly, like he was listening to something beyond the walls of the cabin. I felt a knot form in my stomach. The unease was sharper now. Or them. Something ancient, something wild them. Something ancient, something wild that made my heart skip a beat. I told you to stay away, he said, his voice low, rough. It wasn't the voice I'd heard before, when he was injured, when he was recovering. No, this was different. This voice was full of something primal. I couldn't bring myself to answer. Instead, I just stood there, my body frozen in place. His words felt like a command, like a warning. His eyes flicked toward the door. They're here, he whispered. Before I could ask what he meant, a sound ripped through the night. Loud, terrifying, close. A low growl. It came from outside. The wolves had returned, but this time they were not far off. Their howls were joined by a deep, guttural growl, something that wasn't quite animal, but wasn't human either. My heart thudded in my chest, my mind racing. What was happening? What was he? I told you, he muttered again, his voice harsh and filled with regret. They're coming for you, for both of us. I could feel the tension build as the growls grew louder, closer. My body was frozen, my legs unwilling to move. But the door was still open, and I had the fleeting thought that maybe I could just leave. Maybe I could go outside, get to safety, and never look back. But I couldn't. I didn't know where to run. I didn't know where to go. The only person I could turn to was him, the man who had changed everything, the man who had been hiding something, and that something was now threatening both of us. "Who are they?" I asked, my voice shaky, barely audible against the growls that filled the air. His gaze met mine again, and this time, there was no doubt in his eyes. It was the kind of certainty that hit me in the gut and left me breathless. "They're the pack," he said, his voice strained. "My pack, and they're coming for me." He paused for a moment, taking a deep breath, his face softening, as if he was struggling with something deep inside. "I didn't want you to get involved, Kendra. I didn't want you to know. But now—" His voice trailed off. But I had to know. I had to understand. "Pack?" I repeated, barely able to process the word. He nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving mine. "We don't belong in your world, Kendra. You shouldn't have brought me here. I can't keep you safe." The weight of his words settled over me like a heavy blanket, smothering me in the cold of reality. There was so much he hadn't told me, and so much more that he had yet to reveal. The door creaked behind us, and I spun around, my heart nearly stopping in my chest. They were here. The wolves had arrived. And as they entered, I realized something. I wasn't just trapped in the cabin anymore. I wasn't just in the middle of a storm. I had walked straight into the heart of their world. A world I didn't understand. A world that was far darker, far more dangerous than I could ever have imagined. The night was different. I could feel it even before I heard the howls in the distance, the deep, resonating growls that seemed to echo through the very bones of the earth. The wind picked up, not the usual gentle breeze that whispered through the trees, but something fierce, a raw gust that cut right through the walls of the cabin. It was the kind of night that made every sound seem amplified, every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet, every crack of wood in the fire impossibly loud. I knew, without a doubt, what was coming: the full moon. It had been days since I had opened that door and seen the look in his eyes. The words he'd spoken had haunted me. I had convinced myself, at least for a while, that it was just a story, just his way of explaining away the things I couldn't understand. But deep down, I knew it was real. Something inside him was waking, something that belonged to the wild. I couldn't help but notice how on edge he'd been these last few hours. It was as though he was waiting for the moon to rise. Every time I'd tried to talk to him, there was that same distance between us, that cold space where he kept something locked away. His eyes flickered with fear, and even though he tried to hide it, I could see the tension in his shoulders, the rigid way his body stood, as though he was fighting something inside of him. "Stay inside tonight," he had told me earlier, his voice strained, his gaze sharp, more urgent than I had ever heard it before. "Don't leave this cabin. Not tonight." I tried to ask him what was going on, but he only looked at me with that quiet intensity, as if he were battling with himself. I stayed inside, but the fear in my chest grew. Something was coming. Something I couldn't see. Then it happened. The moon broke free from the clouds, and for the first time I saw him shift.
You don't understand. You have no idea what the moon does to us. When it rises, it awakens the beast. You think I can control it, that I can keep it hidden, but I can't. I can't keep it away. Not tonight, and neither can you. You don't know the power of what's coming for us. The pack, they'll know the second I shift, and they'll come. They'll come for me and you. You'll be their prey.
I froze, my hand on the door, my heart hammering in my chest. His words hit me like a freight train, leaving me gasping for breath. Prey? I was no longer just an observer. I was part of this now, caught in the shifting tide of something far darker than I had ever imagined. I stood still for a long moment, unsure of what to do, where to go. The sound of his breathing had changed. It was deep, more primal, a steady rhythm that pulsed through the walls of the cabin. A growl rumbled low from behind the door, followed by the unmistakable sound of bones cracking. The kind of crack you hear when something is breaking, not just the body, but something deeper, something far more ancient. His voice, now strained and raw, sounded again from the other side of the door. I warned you. You don't understand what you're dealing with. I'm not just a man. I'm not human anymore. Don't make me hurt you. Just stay away. I could hear him, but I didn't understand. Not fully. I had seen his transformation before, in the faint glow of moonlight. But this was different. The growls, the shifting. It wasn't just a curse or a transformation. It was a battle. A fight to keep something at bay. Something dangerous that even he could no longer control. I could feel the tension mounting, the raw power of the man, no, the beast, on the other side of the door. A beast that was still fighting against the full moon's pull. I moved toward the window, my pulse quickening. The howls in the distance had become louder, sharper. They weren't just wolves, these were shifters. Another pack, another presence closing in. Something crashed against the door, and I stumbled back in shock. And the door burst open. He stood there in the room, his eyes wide with fear. But then, the door burst open. He stood there in the doorway, his body heaving with each ragged breath. His clothes had been torn, shredded in the process of his transformation. His face, it wasn't human anymore. His jaw was too wide, his teeth too sharp, his eyes glowing like molten gold. A deep, guttural growl escaped his throat as he stepped toward me, his form rippling with power, shifting with every breath. And then he howled. The sound filled the cabin, a raw cry of pain, of power, of the release of everything he had been holding back. I stumbled backward, my hand pressed against my mouth to stifle a scream. His presence, his force, was overwhelming, consuming the space. He wasn't the man I had taken in anymore. He wasn't the outlaw I had saved. He was something far darker, something wild. But even as my fears spiraled, I couldn't bring myself to run. His eyes locked onto mine, a silent plea behind the ferocity, an apology in his gaze. He was struggling, I could see it. His body jerked with the effort of holding himself together, as if the wolf inside him was clawing to get out. Run! He growled the word, more animal than man, but there was something in his voice, something I couldn't deny. He was warning me, pleading with me. Run, while you can. I wanted to scream, to shout at him that I couldn't leave him, but my voice was swallowed by the howl of the wolf within him. And then it happened. His body jerked violently, his form shifting in a blur, his limbs contorted, bones cracking, elongating. It was painful to watch. Each shift, each break in his human form, as if his body were tearing apart just to make room for the monster inside. The air grew thick with the scent of fur, of raw animal, of blood. And then, as quickly as it had started, the transformation was complete. Standing before me was no man. It was a wolf. A massive, powerful beast. The largest wolf I had ever seen, its fur midnight black with streaks of silver running down its back, its eyes glowing a fierce amber. The animal stood still, towering over me, its breath heavy, its muscles coiled like springs. Its gaze was fixed on me, and I felt the power radiating from it. It was the power of a predator. But then, just as quickly, the beast dipped its head toward me, its gaze softening. I wasn't sure if it was the man, still trapped inside, or the animal who had learned to trust me, but it stood still, watching me, waiting. It was a moment of pure, untamed connection. And then, before I could process it all, he turned toward the door, as though sensing something else. Another presence. The pack. I could feel it. More of them were out there, in the woods, closing in on us. I could feel the shifting tension in the air. They were hunting. And they were coming for him. I didn't know what I was expecting when I heard the howls in the distance. But whatever it was, I was sure it wasn't this. He had shifted, his body transforming into something wild, something I couldn't comprehend. And now, as the cabin felt smaller and smaller around me, the man, or the creature, whatever he had become, was standing before me. The air was filled with tension, a silent pressure between us that felt like it was ready to burst. He was a beast now. His fur was dark and sleek, almost black, with hints of silver running down his back. His eyes burned bright amber in the firelight, glowing with the same raw intensity they'd had when I first saw him, when I first brought him into my cabin. He was standing in the doorway, a massive creature that was more wolf than man, its chest heaving with each breath, its claws scraping the wooden floor as it took a cautious step forward. My heart raced in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I would lose my mind. This wasn't just an outlaw I had saved. This wasn't just a man with a past. This was an alpha. I swallowed hard, my throat dry, and took a step back. But the wolf didn't move. It watched me, its eyes unwavering, almost calm, as if it was trying to communicate something. But the deeper I looked, the more I realized I wasn't looking at just an animal. I was looking at something more, something that was both terrifying and familiar. The creature in front of me moved closer. It was so close now that I could feel its heat, feel the pull of its presence. I wanted to run, I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I stood there, frozen, not sure what to do, what to say. The words I wanted to speak were lodged in my throat, caught between disbelief and something else, something far more dangerous. He lowered his head, bringing his nose close to mine, and I held my breath. My pulse thundered in my ears. There was something in the way he looked at me, as if he knew everything about me. For a moment, there was only the sound of the fire crackling, the wind outside howling, and then the man's voice, rough and low, broke the silence. "You should have known by now," he said, the words a low growl that vibrated through my chest. "It's been there the entire time." I took a step back, instinctively pulling away from him. My head spun. His words hit me like a fist to the stomach, knocking the wind out of me. I was gasping for breath, not sure if I was ready to hear whatever truth he had to say. I couldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, paralyzed with both fear and curiosity. But there was something else deep inside me, something that refused to look away from him. "I told you I wasn't just an outlaw," he said. His voice was rougher now, more strained. "But you didn't listen. You didn't want to hear it." His words cut through me like shards of glass, and I took another step back. But he wasn't done. No, he wasn't even close. I'm not like you. I never was. I'm Alpha, Kendra, a werewolf. I'm not running from the law. I'm running from them. From my own kind. From my pack. He paused, his breath coming in ragged gasps, his body trembling, though not from fear. It was something else. Something darker. You think you're helping me, but you don't know what you've gotten yourself into. You never should have brought me here. The pack will come for you. And me. They always find us, Kendra. Always. We can't hide forever. I stood there, staring at him, my mouth dry. His confession hit me like a wave crashing over a cliff. Relentless. Unforgiving. But still, I couldn't make sense of it. None of it made sense. I shook my head. You're a... What? My voice sounded alien to my own ears, as if the words weren't even coming from me. His eyes locked onto mine, burning with a fierce intensity. I'm a wolf, Kendra, an alpha, born into the pack, raised to lead it. But I've been on the run for years. I betrayed them, and now they're hunting me down. I opened my mouth to speak, to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. You didn't think you could just save me, did you? He asked, his voice low, dangerous. You don't know the danger you've invited into your home. I didn't want this. I didn't want you to get involved. But now they'll come. They'll find us. They'll find you. I tried to grasp what he was saying, tried to wrap my head around the idea of him being alpha, a leader of some pack, some werewolf tribe that he'd betrayed. But it was too much, too impossible to believe. I had known him as a man, broken, running from something, but now, hearing the truth, seeing the monster he had become, I couldn't understand it. And yet, despite everything, despite the fear gnawing at my insides, I couldn't tear myself away. Why didn't you tell me sooner? I finally managed to ask, my voice small, weak. Why keep it from me? He hesitated, his eyes flickering with something that wasn't just the hunger of the beast within him. There was regret there, a flicker of guilt, of sadness, but it was fleeting. I didn't want you to be part of this world, he said, his voice almost a whisper now. I didn't want you to get caught in the middle of the pack's war. I didn't want you to see me like this. As an alpha, as a predator. The words stung. They cut deeper than I expected, and I felt something else stir inside me, something that I hadn't wanted to admit to myself. I was drawn to him. I didn't want to be. I shouldn't have been. But I was. There was something inside me, something that had always been there, hidden just below the surface, that called to him, that understood what he was. I wasn't just afraid. I was enthralled. The air stood still around us. The tension between us, a crackling current in the space between our bodies. The light flickered, casting deep shadows around the room, and in those shadows I saw him. Not the man who had stumbled into my cabin, not the outlaw I had helped, but the alpha. The beast that lurked beneath the surface, waiting for the right moment to strike. Before I could say anything more, he took a step forward. The tension worsened. You need to leave, Kendra, he growled, the words harsh, low. You can't stay here. Not with me. Not with the pack closing in. I could see the desperation in his eyes, but also something else. Something I hadn't noticed before. Something darker. Something more primal. But I didn't move. Instead, I stood my ground. I'm not going anywhere, I said, my voice stronger than I felt. For a moment, he didn't move, his amber eyes locking onto mine. The wolf inside him was still there, but so was the man. the man who had been running, the man who had tried to protect me by keeping me in the dark. But now, the truth was out, and everything had changed. "You should have gone," he murmured, his voice barely audible, a mix of sadness and anger. But I didn't hear the defeat in his tone. Instead, I heard the quiet acceptance of something darker. And then, in a sudden movement, he shifted again, stepping back into the shadows. The howls of the pack grew louder, closer. They were coming, and nothing could stop them now. The night had become something else entirely. The world outside the cabin felt like a different place now, one I no longer recognized. The walls seemed thinner, the cabin too small for the weight of the truth that hung between us. I thought I understood the danger, that I had seen enough, but the reality of what I was caught up in became clearer with every breath I took. He wasn't just an outlaw. He wasn't just a man hiding from the law. The man who had stumbled into my life was an alpha werewolf, and I was no longer just a bystander. I was part of something I hadn't understood, a world I had never asked to be part of. The pack had found us, and with it came the terrifying reality of the world he had kept hidden from me. I had no idea how close they were, how close the wolves were. The howls had started again, closer now, unmistakable. This time, they weren't distant echoes. They were here, in the woods, on the edge of the clearing outside the cabin. A low, throaty growl rolled through the wind, followed by another. The sounds were so sharp, so full of intent, that it sent a shiver through me. It was more than just wolves. These were shifters, a pack, a predator's call. I could feel them moving, feel the air shift, feel their presence before I saw them. My body went stiff, every muscle locking into place. I should have felt fear, terror, but instead there was a strange, unexplainable pull inside me, a sense of inevitability, as though this was the path I was meant to walk. The man, the alpha, had gone silent, his presence growing larger, filling the room. He didn't speak at first, just stood there, his body tense, coiled. I saw the weight of what was happening in his eyes, the realization that there was no escaping this. He wasn't just worried about me, he was worried about himself, about the pack, about what this would mean for both of us. But even with all the tension, all the confusion that swirled around us, I couldn't tear my gaze away from him. He was both the predator and the protector, the man and the beast, and I didn't know which one terrified me more. "They're here," he said, his voice quieter than it had been, almost a whisper, but there was no mistaking the edge of urgency in his words. He shifted again, his movement sharp and predatory. "They're coming for me, for both of us." I wanted to ask him more, wanted to shout at him, demand answers, ask why he hadn't told me sooner, but the words wouldn't come. He was already moving toward the window, his gaze fixed on the dark shapes moving in the trees. The wolves, his pack, had arrived. I could feel the shift in the air, something heavy, something palpable, moving closer with every second that passed. The wolves were near, circling, closing in on the cabin. I didn't know how I could sense it. Maybe it was instinct, or maybe it was just the fact that I had crossed into a world I didn't understand. But then, I saw them. The first shape emerged from the tree line, moving silently, a shadow among shadows. I could see the gleam of their eyes in the dark, their silhouettes impossibly large against the backdrop of the trees. Another appeared beside it, and then another until the entire clearing seemed to be filled with them. Shifters. pack. They were circling, waiting, like predators. But the leader, the alpha, stepped forward, his gaze sharp, focused. His eyes met mine, and for a split second it felt like the world stopped. His presence was overwhelming, almost suffocating, as if the very air around him was filled with power. He didn't need to speak for me to understand. He was in charge. He was the one who commanded. He was the one who had come for him. I felt a pull toward him, a primal recognition that I didn't understand. There was a bond between them, a connection that went beyond words, beyond sight. I couldn't put my finger on it, but it was real. And as I looked at the alpha, I understood. This was his world, and I had just walked into it. The man, the alpha, moved toward the door, his eyes never leaving the pack as they closed in. They'll want to know why I left, he muttered, his voice low, almost to himself. They'll want me back, whether I want it or not. I didn't know what he meant, didn't understand what he was saying, but something in my chest tightened. He was betraying them? But before I could say anything, the alpha at the head of the pack stepped forward, his massive form emerging from the shadows like a creature of legend, his movements calculated, slow, deliberate. He didn't need to speak. His mere presence was enough. The growl in his throat was a challenge, a warning. His eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, I saw something dark in them. Something that made my blood run cold. You shouldn't have come here, little human, the alpha spoke, his voice deep and resonating. It wasn't directed at me, but it felt like it was. His eyes flicked toward the man standing beside me. You know the rules. You don't leave the pack. Not unless there's a reason. The man beside me stiffened, his muscles tense. I didn't choose to leave, he growled, his voice rough. It's not like you think. I didn't betray you. I left for good reason. The alpha's lips curled in a sneer, the hostility in his expression undeniable. You don't get to choose anymore. You broke the rules, and now we have to take you back. I didn't know what to say, but the one thing I knew for sure was that the pack wasn't just here for him. They were here for me too. The alpha's eyes flicked back to me, as if he had read the thoughts in my head. You don't belong here, he growled, his voice a low rumble in his chest. Get out of the way. For the first time since I had met him, the man beside me, my alpha, showed fear. It was brief, just a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes, but it was there. And for the first time, I realized that I was in danger. Not just from the pack, but from everything I had been running from. Get out, the alpha repeated, louder this time, and his command rang through the air, thick with power. The man beside me shifted. But at that moment, I understood one thing. I couldn't run anymore. Not from them. Not from what I had gotten myself into. This wasn't just his battle to fight. It was mine too.
You don't understand, do you? She's not just a woman. She's a weapon. A key to everything we've been fighting for. You think you're protecting her, but you're only fooling yourself. She's been hiding the truth from you, just like you've been hiding from the pack. But now it's time to face it, to face her. She doesn't even know it yet. But her power can break the balance. The moment we take her, we win this war. You think you can stop us? You think you can protect her? She's the one that will tear everything apart. You're so blind. I'm not here for you, Alpha. I'm here for her. She's the one who's been holding the reins to this whole war, and I'm going to take her. You can either stand aside or fight, but one way or another, she's coming with me. You may have saved her once, but this time, you're not strong enough to protect her from what's coming. She's already marked. She's already ours.
The words hit me like a stone. each one sinking deeper into my chest. My body tensed, the cold realization sweeping over me like a chilling breeze. What had I done? What had I gotten myself into? I looked at the man beside me, the one who had saved me. But now, as the rival alpha's words echoed in my mind, the truth became undeniable. I was more than a simple bystander in this twisted war. My very existence had a purpose I had never known. And that purpose? It was a weapon. Something that could tip the scales of this war in ways I couldn't begin to understand. The Alpha's words weren't just threats. They were a declaration. My blood ran cold as the enormity of his confession sank in. I wasn't just caught in the middle of some petty pack dispute. And I wasn't just someone who had accidentally gotten wrapped up in a world of shifting wolves and brutal battles. No, I was a part of the war itself. His eyes, his glowing amber eyes, held mine for a moment longer than I was comfortable with. The weight of his gaze bore down on me like a heavy burden I had no choice but to carry. I could feel the heat of his presence even from across the room. The tension was suffocating, but his words, they lingered, unanswered. The man I had come to care for, the man who had kept me safe in a world that didn't make sense, was silent. He stood still, his chest rising and falling slowly, but I could see the tightness in his jaw, the conflict that flashed across his face. It wasn't just fear. It wasn't just anger. It was something deeper, more primal. I couldn't breathe, and the ground beneath me felt like it was shifting, pulling me into a world I wasn't ready to face. My mind raced, trying to process everything. The pack, the wolves outside. They weren't just here for him. They were here for me too. "You don't have to fight," he said, his voice low, almost apologetic. "You don't have to be a part of this." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. "Then what do I do?" I asked. His eyes flickered with something that looked like pain. He didn't want me involved. He didn't want me to be a part of the chaos that had been chasing him for so long. But the truth was, I already was a part of it. And no matter how hard I tried to deny it, the longer I stayed here, the more connected I became to everything. The power that the Alpha spoke of, the power that ran through my blood, wasn't just a threat. It was mine. I felt the weight of that realization in every part of me. I didn't know what it was, this power that pulsed beneath my skin, but I knew it was real. It was why they were here, why they wanted me. I had a part to play in all of this, whether I liked it or not. The howls grew louder outside, closer. I could feel them, the wolves, circling, prowling just beyond the tree line. Their hunger, their need for me. A chill ran down my spine as I realized just how badly they wanted me. The pack wasn't here just for him. They were here for me. To claim me, to take me, to use me. "You don't have to do this," he repeated, his voice strained. "You don't have to choose between running and staying. I never wanted you to be a part of this. I never wanted you to face them." But his words were hollow now. I knew he was trying to protect me. I knew he was trying to shield me from the truth, from the danger that was creeping closer with every passing second. But it was too late. The door had already been opened, and now there was no going back. I turned toward the door, my breath shallow, my body frozen in place. The weight of the decision settled on me, heavy as stone. Stay and fight, or run and leave him to face the pack alone. My heart wavered in my chest, torn between two choices I couldn't bear to make. I looked at him, at the man who had given everything to keep me safe, to protect me from this world. His eyes locked onto mine, filled with guilt and fear. And for a moment, I saw everything. The burden he carried, the weight of the life he had chosen for himself, and the reason he had kept me in the dark for so long. But now, it was too late, and I was already in the middle of it, and I didn't know if I could walk away. The howls outside grew closer. The wolves were here. The pack had arrived, and I had no idea what I was supposed to do next. I couldn't deny it any longer. I wasn't just watching a battle unfold. I was in it now. The moon hung high in the sky, casting long shadows that stretched into the trees, turning the world outside into a dark, dangerous place. The fire in the cabin's hearth flickered in the dimness, casting a weak glow that barely made a dent in the encroaching darkness. I was standing at the threshold of something much bigger than myself. And deep down, I knew that there was no turning back. The man, my alpha, was beside me, his body tense, his jaw clenched. His amber eyes flickered with a blend of sadness, rage, and regret. He didn't want me to fight. Yes, I could see that in every line of his face, every strained breath he took. The wolves were closing in. The pack was ready to take what they wanted, and we were standing between them and their goal. I turned to him, my eyes searching his face for some kind of answer, some kind of guidance. But all I found there was the same pain that had filled him since the moment I had walked into his life. "Kendra," he whispered, his voice rough as if every word was being dragged from him. "I told you earlier, I didn't want this for you. I didn't want you to be part of this world. But now it's too late. The pack, they'll take you, whether you're ready or not." His words hit me like a punch to the stomach, but I didn't flinch. Something inside me, something deep, buried beneath layers of fear, began to stir. It wasn't just the adrenaline. And it wasn't just the instinct to survive. It was something else. Something I had been denying. The power. It was there, buried beneath my skin, and I could feel it now, like a charge running through my veins. The more I tried to ignore it, the more it fought to break free. The more the pack closed in, the stronger it became. It was a force that had always been there, hidden in plain sight, waiting for this very moment. And now, as I faced the wolves, as I realized just how much danger I was in, I couldn't deny it any longer. I wasn't just human. I was part of this world, their world. It started with a strange heat at the center of my chest, spreading outward like fire until it ignited every part of me. It was the same warmth I had felt when I first locked eyes with him, when I had first felt that strange connection. But this time, it was stronger, more intense, more dangerous. I could hear their howls outside, louder now, closer. The wolves were waiting, but I wasn't waiting anymore. I was done being afraid. Something inside me snapped. The man beside me, my alpha, turned to face me, his eyes wide in surprise, as if he hadn't expected me to feel what I was feeling. But I didn't have time to explain. I felt the power inside me surge, and without thinking, I stepped forward, out into the night, toward the door that led into the wilderness. I could feel the pack watching me, their eyes glinting in the shadows. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I couldn't stand still anymore. Not with the wolves so close, not with everything at stake. The man followed, his footsteps heavy behind me, but his voice was quiet, full of regret. "Kendra, you don't understand." "I understand more than you think," I said, my voice firm. I wasn't sure where the words were coming from, but they felt right. This is my fight now, too. I'm not going to run from it anymore. I felt the energy pulse through me, through every step I took. The more I fought it, the more it pushed against my ribs, pressing against the walls of my chest, demanding to be free. The pack outside was getting closer. I could feel them, their eyes locked on me, their hunger growing as they watched, waiting for me to make the first move. I didn't know if I could win. I didn't know if I could survive this. But I knew one thing. I wasn't going to just stand there and let them take what was mine. The man reached me, standing by my side, his hand resting on my arm, but I didn't look at him. His presence beside me was enough. The power that had been growing inside me was finally starting to take shape, to become something I could use. The strength was mine. It was always mine. I just hadn't known it until now. A loud crack echoed through the night, and suddenly, the alpha of the pack stepped forward from the shadows. His eyes glowed bright, a fiery yellow that burned through the darkness. His muscles rippled under his skin as he shifted, his body tense with the anticipation of what was about to happen. "You think you can stop us?" The alpha sneered, his voice deep and full of contempt. "You think you can fight me?" I felt a shift inside me, a surge of something raw, something untamed. The energy was building, and I had no idea what would happen next. "I'm not afraid of you," I whispered, though the words felt strange in my mouth. I didn't recognize the person saying them, but the confidence that rose from within me felt real. It was me, in a way I had never known before. The alpha laughed, but it wasn't the laughter of someone who had control. It was the laughter of someone who knew they were about to lose. He lunged. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. The moment he moved toward me, I reacted. The power inside me surged like a tide, and I moved with it, faster than I ever thought possible. I felt the shift, the knotting of my energy with the land, with the wolves surrounding us, with everything that had been building inside me. My body reacted before my mind could catch up. And then, just like that, the battle began. The aftermath of the battle was something I never could have prepared for. The cabin was destroyed, torn apart by the pack's fury, by the chaos that had erupted within these walls. The fire had long since died down, leaving only the smoldering remains of what had once been a safe haven. The furniture was overturned, shards of wood and glass scattered across the floor like broken dreams. The walls, cracked and splintered, seemed to echo with the growls and howls that had once filled the space. Now, silence reigned, thick and suffocating. I stood in the middle of the wreckage, my breath ragged, trying to make sense of it all. The man beside me, the alpha, was still here, standing tall despite the battle we'd just fought. His eyes were no longer glowing with the fury of the shift. Now there was only weariness, but also something else, something I couldn't quite place, something I knew was different. We had both changed tonight, in ways I couldn't even begin to describe. The pack had been driven off. The alpha, my alpha, hadn't just fought for survival. He'd fought for us, for what we were becoming. The atmosphere around us still hummed with the remnants of the battle, the energy of the fight lingering like an aftershock. But now it was over. The wolves had retreated, their hunger unsatisfied for now. And as I stood there in the debris, I realized one terrifying truth. We were still alive, still standing despite everything. But we weren't the same. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice softer than I expected, the usual rawness gone. His eyes searched mine as if looking for something. Something I wasn't sure I could give him. "I think I'm still processing," I said, my voice hoarse, barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to say. What could I say? The battle had changed everything. The wolves outside were a reminder that this fight wasn't over, that we weren't finished. I felt the weight of his gaze on me, and for the first time in a long while, it wasn't filled with fear or doubt. It was trust. There was something deeper between us now, something that neither of us could deny. We were in this together, for better or worse. "You don't have to be afraid anymore," he said, his hand finding mine. The touch was comforting, but I could feel the strain in his grip, as if he was holding on just as tightly as I was. "I'll protect you. I'll always protect you." And in that moment, I realized this was it. The pack was gone for now, but the real battle was just beginning. We weren't running anymore. We were standing side by side, facing the world that had been hidden from me all this time. A world of shifting wolves, of packs at war, of untold power and danger. But it wasn't just his fight anymore. It was mine too. I hadn't asked for any of this. I hadn't asked to be dragged into his world. But now that I was here, I couldn't just walk away. I was part of it now, part of him. The knot that had tied us together wasn't just one of fate. It was one of choice. A choice I had made by standing beside him, by refusing to run, by fighting for him when it counted. And despite all the uncertainty, despite the unknowns that lay ahead, I knew one thing. I couldn't do this without him. I looked around the cabin, taking in the devastation, the remnants of the fight, the debris, the broken pieces of the life I'd thought I had, seemed to reflect the chaos in my mind. But I wasn't lost anymore, not when I had him by my side. "We can't stay here," I said, my voice more confident now. "There's nothing left for us here." He nodded. He didn't need to ask. He knew what I meant. This place, this cabin, had been our refuge, but it wasn't safe anymore. We needed to move, to find somewhere we could rebuild, somewhere we could be free from the threat of the pack. But we also knew that no matter where we went, we couldn't escape what was coming. "Where will we go?" I asked, my heart racing as I glanced at him. He met my gaze, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something new in his eyes. Hope. Not the hope of someone running from their past, but the hope of someone ready to fight for a future. Our future. "We go wherever we need to go," he said, his voice steady now. "We make our own path. Together." And that was it. That was all I needed to hear. The world outside had changed, and I had changed with it. I could feel it in my bones. The shift inside me. I was no longer just a woman running from danger. I was someone who was ready to face it head on with the man who had saved me, and who, I now realized, needed me just as much as I needed him. We left the cabin, stepping out into the cold night. The air was biting, but it didn't matter. It wasn't the cold that mattered anymore. What mattered was what lay ahead, what we would face, together. I glanced at the alpha, my alpha, as we walked side by side. The pack might have retreated for now, but I knew they would return. They would always return. And so would we. We had no choice but to face it. The journey ahead was uncertain, but we were in this together. And I was ready to face whatever came next, with him by my side. The battle's over, but our story is far from done. What do you think will happen next for Kendra and the Alpha? Will they be able to escape the pack's pursuit? Or will they be forced to face a new danger? Drop your thoughts and predictions in the comments below. The adventure is just beginning.